Hi everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Ocean in a Drop, the podcast series done by Nurture. As a part of our student run social initiative Nurture, it is very central for our vision to inspire students to inculcate personal responsibility in their daily life and to show examples to prove the immensity of individual impact that even one person can make a huge difference. So, in this series, we highlight and talk to individuals with successful careers alongside bold social impact to counter the popular thought or notion that, individual student impact can be insignificant or that students will have to deal with an ultimatum between, being ambitious for a successful career versus creating a positive impact on the society. Madhav Datt will be our guest for the first episode. Thank you so much, Madhav, for joining me today, and it's an honor to have you on board.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Entirely my pleasure.
All right. Madhav is a perfect example of the vision that we have with this podcast series. He is the founder and president of Green the Gene, one of the world's largest youth-run environmental nonprofits. And besides their impressive outreach and social impact level across 62 countries, Madhav founded this organization when he was just 8 years old. He carries the same determination today that he started off with, and it can be seen through their work, which involves youth led technology and data driven solutions for community in acute environmental crisis. So, completing his bachelor's and master's from IIT Kharagpur in the field of computer science to studying at Harvard, pursuing the same field, he's also a successful software engineer at Google, proving that one does not have to choose between social impact and other professional ambitions when deciding their career. Madhav, upon finding your profile, the work that you have achieved, the level of social impact that you have created, in tandem with your ambitions as a developer, we were impressed by your work, and beyond that, so inspired that you started Green the Gene at the age of 8. And it's an extremely common thought for students to think that especially it doesn't matter at when we're the age of 8 or even now, like we think that we have to be a bit more grown up to actually create any real social impact. So we would love to hear more about your journey and how you started Green.
Sure. So this started back when I was 8 years old, and it started from this environmental science class that we had. So back then, and this was in third grade, so I was really young. The only thing that I remember from that class was, our teacher telling us 8-year-old kids that in the state of Haryana in India, that's where I grew up, the water table was falling by almost 2 feet every year. Now, I didn't really understand what that meant. I had no idea about the significance of what that was. But growing up, I remember, this is like an area where we've had citywide water rationing, where there have been times where, you have to sort of just sort of make sure that you turn on and store water at like 2 p.m. in the afternoon. There's not going to be any water for the rest of the day. Um, so that suddenly sort of connected the dots for me, right? So it sort of made me realize that as a consequence, it'll be very hard for people to draw groundwater, right? It'll become even harder than it was back then. And so for me, that fact suddenly converted this abstract idea of sustainable development into this very real problem that affected people and affected communities that I knew. And this I think was the inspiration, sort of the spark that got me to start Green the Gene. We started really small as this environmental club in school with 3 friends.
Yeah. So I'm guessing when you started, you would never have guessed, it would be this big at one day. You started with that one thought. Yeah.
Definitely not. I mean, it was a really small start. In fact, we started out planting 6 trees right outside our schoolyard. We spoke to local shopkeepers to ask them not to use plastic bags. It was a very sort of things that we found online that, hey, okay, this can help the environment. Sure, let's try that. Right.
Well,
That was how we
it's
started on
extremely
this
like
journey.
impressive that at that age you guys did all that. So take us through Green the Genes journey, from planting 6 trees outside your class, and now you're creating worldwide social impact and helping millions of individuals. So,
I think it's been a journey of sort of fairly gradual growth, incrementally over many years, where we've changed direction many times, we've pivoted many times, and then eventually sort of realized what what we want to do. What we've asked ourselves those existential questions that, as an organization, where can we make the most difference? How can we have the most impact? And I think so. At some point early on, we started doing many different things. Right, we were planting trees. We were getting people involved from our own school, from other schools in Faridabad. That's where I grew up. Um, so we had a lot of young people getting involved in the organization, um, and so along this journey, we realized a few things. One was that doing policy is hard, right? So and I learned that through other experiences also. But that was one of our early initiatives, was around trying to encourage the government, the central government, to take up initiatives to clean the Yamuna. And we did this in like a fairly large partnership effort called the Wake Up Call. um, and that's when we realized that as an organization, we're really small to have very tangible impact in terms of advocacy or in terms of lobbying. um, and so while those are very important, right, to solve a problem as big as climate change, those are critical. If we just felt that based on what we were doing, that's probably not the best way for us to drive impact. So it was more of a fit question than anything else. And that sort of got us to pivot a little bit. Along the way, we'd grown a little bit. We were working in a few countries at that point, and so one of the sort of interactions that I had back then was with somebody named Busara from Tanzania, and she was roughly the same age I was, probably slightly older at that point. And essentially, so now at 15 years old, she basically came from the small rural community in Tanzania. And during the day, she worked with her parents in the fields planting rice, right? And then at the end of each day, she had to walk over 7 kilometers and then walk all the way back with a 15-kilogram jerry can on her head. So this was like fundamental daily life for her.
yeah,
At that age, where I had the privilege of having access to education, to sort of a lot of, uh, you know, lot of experiences that we consider normal for
yeah, us,
a
yeah,
15-year-old.
yeah,
That was very stark, right? That realization, that was not one off. That 1 in 9 people, like 844 million people across the world, have to go to great lengths to just get access to safe and usable water, just to be able to go about their days. This sort of brought about this realization that uh, climate change is a huge problem. We alone can't solve it. And while any real solution will be multi-stakeholder, it'll be multidisciplinary, right? It'll involve governmental interventions, it'll involve top-down policy, involve private corporations. The impact of those is going to be felt decades later.
yeah,
And there are people like Pusara who need immediate solutions, right? Who need interventions today.
yeah,
So who basically, and that was when we realized that, hey, maybe we can build those, right? If we can't, we probably can't solve climate change alone, right? That we
yeah,
definitely can't do that, but we can at least provide some form of uh, solutions that help alleviate these symptoms, or the sort of these
yeah,
adverse impacts of climate change in the near term, right? So can we solve the systemic issue that they have that is preventing those communities from getting safe water? Probably not. Not, at least not alone. But can we help them get access to safe water today? We found out that we could. And that sort of really made us pivot from all the other work that we were doing to really focus on using technology as a medium to drive change, which is where we really focused on how can we use technology, data, design, to build out these solutions. And then we learned a lot along the way, sort of iterated over this at multiple times, and that's sort of how we got to where we're at in terms of our projects now.
Yeah, that's actually very touching. Also, the fact that she is, we are very privileged in terms of that when we compare our lives for what is normal to us, it's way, yeah, so I understand that. So I can imagine the difficulties that your team must have faced, especially because you are a student-run organization. For getting people to listen to you and for you to convince and put your points through must have been difficult, definitely. But it's good to see that your team, never gave up. It'd be so easy that, once you face a lot of barriers, it's so easy to just give up and be like, we'll try another path. But it's impressive to see that you guys never gave up. And it's motivating to know that especially your vision is so strong, your motive in your mind is so strong that you push through. So Gain the Gene being a student run organization, obviously it involves students from different walks of life and you're all working towards a common cause. So and the first step when you, I think, delve deep into social service is, why are you delving deep into social service? What is your reason for getting into social impact? Also, you don't really need a reason. That's another thing, that I feel that every individual has the capability to change someone's life or make a huge difference even through the smallest of their actions. So I feel the immensity of an individual's impact is highly underestimated, and people often overlook the change that even one person can bring about. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the same.
That's actually a very, very sort of interesting point, and I really appreciate the way you've put that. I mean, fundamentally, when we think about driving change, we usually sort of think about other people doing it in many ways, right? It's bigger institutions,
Yeah.
policymakers,
Yeah.
somebody else who will sort of come in top down and drive how that's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't have to be that way, right? In fact, I'd argue that by and large, it isn't that way. For basically anybody at any level, especially now with the sort of access and the sort of connectivity that we have, it's possible for really anybody across the board to just step up and pick a problem that they care about and really sort of dive into it.
Yeah.
Sure, can you start off by solving a problem for an entire country? Probably not, but you can build your way to something like that, right? And I think that's critical. Just the fact that you find a problem that you care about, find people who are as passionate as you are about that problem, and then just dive right in. I feel like there is a lot of positive change that is driven across the world by people working very directly with their own local communities.
Yeah.
And you know, while that change is often overlooked, it is significant. Like the sheer difference that people across the world are able to make to lives of, you know, just members of their own communities through lived shared experiences, through a deep understanding of what the problems are, and you know, the fact that they've lived through them, they know what needs to be solved, and they're just working towards solving them. And this doesn't have to be like a formal structured nonprofit, right? This can be people do it as individuals, people do it with, you know, with friends, people do it with uh, you know, like in as part of educational institutions, people even do it as like startups, right? Even commercial ventures. So across the board, you've got a lot of people driving impact, and I think uh, it's just amazingly important that individuals not just sort of think about it, but actually feel empowered to
Yeah.
do something like that, to actually sort of step up
Yeah.
and really take ownership of these problems that, you know, they see in their
Yeah.
communities. And I feel that that's sort of how we started. We uh, were young and stupid. I hope we still are. And right, so we took on what was a large problem without really realizing that it's a large problem, and we
Large
were like,
problem.
hey,
Yeah.
if somebody has to do something,
So why not
why
us?
don't we try?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's something that that's sort of like just very useful in the sense that um, it allowed us to go into this sort of very unknown thing, try. Um, and there's millions of people across the world who do that every
Yeah.
day, and so I feel like make
Yeah.
very significant difference in their
Yes.
communities.
I mean, you can always start off small. Like, you don't like, I feel like even that's something that we came, when we started off, we had big plans and we realized we can't tackle them directly. We have to start small. We have to work towards it. If we, like, there's one way of doing it, you can tackle them, but not every, as in, like, start small. Anything that you can do, even the smallest actions make a huge impact. That's what we realize, after working with underprivileged women and children, that's where we're doing. So, in talking about career, so I am extremely interested in aerospace and I'm definitely considering pursuing that field. But so, all my life, when I thought about what I want to do in my life, it was always about, okay, should I pursue social service or should I pursue what I'm studying, like mechanical engineering? And it's never been both. Like, the solution has never been both. Only lately, I was looking at your profile and looking at similar profiles. I'm like, it's, why do I have to give up one passion? Why not both, right? So, uh, you're successful in both, like your social as well as your corporate endeavors. And I think you'll be able to aid many of us to find a calling, to either recognize social service as our potential career, or maybe even to pursue both professional and social paths parallelly. So, do you have any pointers that can help us, start us off?
Sure. I think this was sort of a natural thing that happened with Green the Gene. We didn't really plan for it to happen. It was just sort of it just
Right.
occurred.
Yeah.
And I think the way it happened for us, why we never really thought of that as like a full-time thing, was because we always ran it as a volunteer run, youth run organization, right? The idea was that, hey, climate change affects us the most, so it should be our generation that
Yeah.
actually builds something to solve it, right? So it was entirely young people. And then, given that we were doing other stuff, right? We were in school, then went to college. It was always sort of a volunteer basis thing. But then at one point, we made a conscious decision to continue running it that way. Um, as an organization, that was useful for us because it allowed us to sort of, basically minimize our operating expenses, really focus on impact,
Mm.
really do what was core and what was central to what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Uh, but then it also allowed all of us to, sort of all of our volunteers to do other things, right?
Yeah.
So people who are early in their careers across the board, people who are still in college, still in school, and to follow these other things that we're passionate about, that we've started, that we want to build a career in. Um, and I think that sort of happened naturally. But I feel like that's a as a way to drive change, it really doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
Yeah.
um, and in fact, so definitely very valid approaches to sort of use your professional work as sort of your as the major force to drive change. That's a very sort of natural path as well. uh, but there is really nothing wrong with doing both. Obviously, it does require a little bit of juggling. It does require sort of making sure that you've got strong support systems in place in both places, really, to
Both
make sure
places.
that you
Yeah.
can, yeah,
Handle it.
that you
Yeah.
can sort of handle both things. There are times when you probably have like, you're overwhelmed on one front, and you need somebody else to pick up the slack on the other. So all of those things aside, but for me, I think that's worked really, really well in the sense that it allowed, you know, me to both sort of do CS, to computer science and machine learning professionally, uh, for a living, and then also, uh, sort of leverage the technical skills that I've built both from college as well as from experiences, and sort of those ideas and everything, to see how we can use that to drive social impact. So I think it's been this sort of complementary set of things where one has helped the other. I think that's been a very useful experience for me. So for everybody who's considering, or who's sort of torn between picking one over the other, I feel like you can definitely try both.
Try
And if
both.
you don't necessarily want to like take the jump right away, you can maybe volunteer with an organization that's already existing, see how you like the balance, see how you like the work, and whether it sort of makes sense for you to get involved deeper, whether your job allows you that sort of um, time commitment away
Time
from
commitment.
with other things and whatnot. But I think there are sort of low risk mechanisms to try this approach out and see if it works for you. And if it does, then you really don't have to make the choice.
Yeah, so that is. Yeah, that is extremely true. And yeah, all right. So, I mean, it's kind of, I think everything that you studied, computer science and machine learning, you were able to implement that in Green the Gene as well through your technology driven solutions that you made. Yeah. So I think that's actually really good. I feel if I was to move towards aerospace, I would go towards sustainability, maybe, somewhere more environment friendly. So, given
Definitely.
your journey and exposure so far, and you're a social entrepreneur, so it's possible to have encountered like some pivotal moments in your growth as a social entrepreneur. So, were there instances where you had to prioritize between various factors of your life? Maybe take social impact in between as a trade-off instead of something else.
Um, I think there have been instances which are sort of bigger decision points, but more more so these are like daily decisions that one ends up making, right? So it's really sort of a juggling act to figure out, okay, hey, that today I'm working on I've got a lot to do on at work, so I'm going to focus on that. I just don't have the time to do anything else. So, and there are times like that when there's maybe like something that's major happening, some sort of a launch that's coming out, right? So you really have to focus all of your energies and all of your time there. uh, and then in similar scenarios where there are times when we're building out like something new. So at this point, we're sort of quite close to launching a fairly new project, which will hopefully help people get access to shelter after they've been
Mhm.
displaced from their homes because of natural disasters or fleeing from violence. So that's a project that we're building on. And there are times where things sort of very fundamentally go wrong, and we have no idea what to do. And then you have to sort of really jump in there and be like, okay, let's work through this, right? Let's figure this out.
Yeah,
So I think it's this constant juggling act and just figuring out how do you maybe balance all the various things that's going on instead of, and I feel like that's been slightly more sustainable and manageable for me than sort of doing um, larger, more pivotal decisions here in some sense, right? So
yeah,
I found that it's useful to sort of stick to basically everything does need to move forward. You can't really
yeah,
drop the ball on any of these. So you do have to sort of really do your best across the board. But there are times when one needs more attention than the other, and it's really
yeah.
just sort of you know
So
just
day-to-day decision
keeping.
making.
Yeah,
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 it makes sense. Very understandable as well. If you have two things that require, equally prioritized and require time commitments that you have, your responsibility need. So, could you give some tips or suggestions for anyone who might be even remotely passionate about social service, from absolute beginners to people with a diverse array of experience?
for sure, definitely. I think one of the things that really sort of sticks out that people are usually curious about is how do you get started, and I'll try and talk a little bit about that, right? It doesn't have to be this sort of large monumental decision that you make. It's just really all about finding out some sort of a problem that you care about, right? It could be at whatever scale. It could be affecting basically anybody across the world. But it's really to figure out a problem that you care about personally, that matters to you, um, and then just sort of just actually taking that plunge and diving into it. And you can do that in many different ways, right? You can find people with similar shared lived experiences of the problem to work with. You can work directly with those communities to understand and figure out, what can be done to help them. You could volunteer with existing nonprofits, build out something that you care about, even just use your platforms as a mechanism to help give voice to people who might not, be able to express their problems, or sort of share or bring more light to those problems. So that there's so many different ways that you can drive impact. There's no right answer really, but I do feel that if there's something you care about, it's important to really get involved.
Get involved in any way that we can, register with whoever we can. So I know that in your course, your journey as well, you have worked with UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. So how is that? How did you start? How did
That's
you
been
establish that connection as well?
sure,
Yeah.
sure. So back back in, I think it was 2009 or 11, I don't remember which one of the 2 years. We were invited to sort of share a little bit about what we were doing at back then. The UNEP hosted
Mm.
international children's conferences. So these were
Okay.
they invited a few kids from across the world to just sort of share uh, with not just children but also with adults what they were doing on the environmental space, right? So they were trying to sort of encourage young people to get involved in environmental activism back then. These conferences, unfortunately, don't continue anymore. They discontinued them many years ago.
Mhm.
But that was sort of our first exposure to the UNEP system. There was also was this very interesting realization, right, that we're not alone.
Yeah.
There are so many people out there who care about similar causes, who face similar problems, and who understand the need to do something. So that's actually how we ended up going international and sort of working beyond just India and
Yeah.
beyond a lot of regional problems. Uh, so that's where we got other people involved from different countries and said that we can scale our impact. We can collectively do more and do better than what we
Yeah.
could do separately.
Yeah.
Um, since then, I have been involved in various capacities with the UNEP. I served this is a sort of elected civil society role where I served as the global representative for children and youth to the United Nations Environment Program. So this role was mostly focused on helping, uh, you know, building these sort of paths or opportunities for young people to get involved in the UN
Mm.
system at policy levels,
Yeah.
at programmatic levels, right? So how do we help young people get a seat on the table, have a voice in these decisions that are going to fundamentally affect us, right? So how do
Yeah.
we make that happen as young people? So that was a very interesting experience. Obviously, it's sort of major learning experience for me as well along the way. How do we sort of interact with policy making bodies? How do
Yeah.
we uh, build those avenues for youth involvement? Um, and in this process, I met a lot of incredible activists across the board, some of whom got involved with Clean the Genes, some of whom are doing a lot of very exciting stuff across the
Mm.
board. So I think that was a very interesting journey with the UNEP. Yeah.
That is very nice to hear. Obviously motivating me, and I'm pretty sure motivating anyone who listens to this to take it up as well. So thank you so much, Madhav, for this. This was extremely insightful and definitely did broaden my mind, with regard to following my dreams, be it social service or aerospace. And the whole thing about social impact, it's mainly just about helping people. Like you have someone that you care about, or you have a cause that you care about and you want to follow it. And you should not hesitate before you follow it, right? Just any small way that you can, maybe even just volunteering somewhere, it makes a difference. So the reason that what we start off our social service should stick with us throughout, and should be that reason that we wake up in the morning and we continue our efforts every day. So you have truly shown the immensity of an individual's impact, that even one person can make a huge difference by just involving themselves in social service. And you've also shown that we don't have to choose or treat social impact as a trade off. So thank you, Madhav. This is great.
Thank you so much. It was entirely my pleasure. Really enjoyed speaking with you about this and sort of sharing a little bit about what I
Thank you.
think about social impact. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.